started to suspect I might be after my son was diagnosed. So probably about 3-4 years ago, once I started to learn more about what it's like to be autistic.
I think it was around year 6 or 7 time, just when I was becoming accustomed to secondary school. And at that point, I was getting really annoyed with the teachers always being around me and like personal assistants kind of constantly looming over me. I was like, Mum, why is this happening? And she was like, oh yeah, because you're on the autistic spectrum. It's not like I've tried to hide it from you. And then I was like, oh, okay, can I, like, where's the evidence in it? Because at the time I was like, okay, a bit skeptical. And then she basically just gave me my documents. And then from when I was like 2 or 3, I kind of did my own research and continued to do my own research over time, because the definition of autism and Asperger's changed over time from, you know, being 2 separate entities to being one long spectrum. So I feel like the diagnosis is static, but the traits and kind of the personalities that come with it fluctuate throughout time. So it's kind of like one long learning process, I feel, to do with autism, but there is some grounded like information about it, which I do keep to.
So I was 19, about midway through my first tumultuous year at university, and I was doing quite well in terms of grades. They were fine, not brilliant, but fine. But the social and independence aspect of modern university education were incredibly challenging for me. And so I did what I'd always done when things were tough. I turned to books. And I never really got the university thing of suddenly reading Les Miserables or War and Peace because you want to seem very intellectual. So I, at this point, am still reading Jodi Picoult. And she has a book called House Rules, which is about the relationship between a teenager with Asperger's and his brother. And suddenly it was like parts of my life just came into sharp focus, things that I'd never really knew were unusual. So that was kind of how I discovered it. Through various ups and downs, I ended up eventually talking to my parents, and it turns out they'd already known. They had figured it out when I was about 14, and since then they'd surreptitiously researched the topic enough to be sure.
Wow.
Yeah. I think they wanted me to benefit probably from thinking I was normal as long as possible, so that I didn't end up stigmatizing myself. And God, looking back, being a teenage girl is hard enough.
I understood straight away, actually, that I was on the spectrum, because when I got that diagnosis, it was a reaffirmation of the fact that I was very different. It was already something that I had observed when I was in education, being among my peers, not liking to do the same kind of things that they did, not really enjoying the environment I was in, being very sensitive to certain things, so to light, to sound in particular in the evenings, in the dark as well. So actually getting a diagnosis of autism provided some structure, some framework to all of that from the start. Whether I accepted I had a diagnosis of autism is another matter, and that took me a couple more years, I think, to accept that and to feel comfortable with that and to be talking about it as openly as I am now. At home, I very much had a supportive environment and trying to understand what was going on in the knowledge and in the hope that that would basically enable me to achieve my potential. School itself was a bit more challenging for me. People at that time didn't really have much training or understanding of autism, and there was a general default to try and normalise people. And what I mean by normalise people is the idea that, you know, oh, maybe if somebody's like somebody else or like what we believe everyone else to be, then that will include that person, and that will actually make things easier for them, things better for them. What that actually does is it leads to something known as like masking. It's basically where if young people and people more generally are just trying to sort of hide some of the ways that their autism manifests itself in the idea that they should be behaving more normally, then actually, you know what, that can cause a lot of problems behind the scenes. It can be a source of stress and anxiety, and I know for me, the stresses, the anxiety, the strain of trying to maintain that just manifested itself at home for me, where I would just feel, again, I suppose stressed, anxious, slightly upset about things, and so that was very challenging as well.
My parents were quite supportive. I feel like my mum kind of cared to more like maternal basic needs. Like she kind of helped me out with anxiety. My dad, he was somewhat supportive, but he kind of like taught me to toughen up a bit, I guess. Yeah. School-wise, ironically, I had too much support. I was one of those weird cases where they actually had too many support assistants and they just assigned one to me without even asking me if that was the support I needed. So literally for the first year of secondary school, every time I was trying to get on with work, they'd just literally be looming over me like, oh, so this is what we're supposed to be doing. And I'm just like, are you like a spy or something, you know? So that was like incredibly frustrating. However, over time, I did get through to them. And I did say, look, just give me the extra time and this quiet room and I will be fine. And took them till GCSE, but you know, we don't talk about that anymore. Definitely. I mean, I feel like my special interests aren't necessarily to do with my autism. Like, for example, just because I like or dislike something is not because I'm autistic, i.e. I don't like hazelnuts, but that doesn't make me autistic, I just don't like hazelnuts. But I feel like special interest-wise, at the moment I'd say my current interest is Red Dead Redemption 2. Oh, yeah. This might age the video a bit, but essentially, just I love the game so much that I actually ended up basing my initial dissertation proposal, which I handed in on Monday, around cowboys and the Mexican-USA border. So that'll be interesting a few months down the line where I'll kind of move on to a different interest and realise I still have to do that, but I don't have to worry about it right now.
When I was a child, one of my great interests was Grand Prix racing, and I could tell you all kinds of meaningless facts. Meaningless in the sense that actually they don't make any substantive difference to your life or if we were having a conversation about them, but they very much interested me. My special interests now are very much associated with keeping myself healthy and happy. It's one of these things where, because I do have sensory differences, I find I like very tranquil environments. So one of my interests is being able to get out and to walk in my surroundings, to hike, to comb the beach, to walk the woods. And those are very much things that I actually like to pursue in my free time now.
At school, I was very interested in forensic science for about 3 years. And over the years, I've had passions which include photography, my garden, namely cataloguing the plants in my garden, and more recently now is neurodiversity and trying to research as much as I can about that.
I've never gone through a phase of being really intensely focused on one thing. I tend to go through sort of micro special interests. So I tend to go through TV shows. Like I watched the first 3 seasons of Game of Thrones in a week. Yeah, I was at university, I was supposed to be revising, it was not good. I don't really mind how people phrase it. I identify as having Asperger's syndrome more than autism, and saying, you know, like Aspie is what some people say, and I don't mind that. But to be honest, the fact that someone's trying to get it right in the first place is what means something to me, not how they say it really. But that's a personal view. As long as they're not calling me like, you know, so what's your disability? How are you different? How are you retarded? Then I'm probably not going to care.
I have autism and I am on the autistic spectrum. It's how I describe myself. So any terms, as long as it's not like an offensive term, I'm completely fine with.
From my own position, it's very much a personal preference. I have no strong opinions either way. I think the most important thing to remember in terms of the use of language is actually to engage with the individual. There really is no right or wrong answer.
I tend to use I'm autistic, but I don't really mind because not everybody knows. I think the key thing for me is that people consider me as a person first, and the terminology is terminology. If I were giving advice to myself 5 years ago, it's to never give up hope, and that there will be some extremely difficult times as they try and find their own place in the world. But the more you put in terms of supporting them and giving them a positive role model to live up to, the more I think that will change things in the future. You know, we've gone from my son being kicked out of 2 schools to now succeeding and thriving at a school where he's supported, and from having worried about what his future would be, we're now in a position where he dreams of becoming a scientist and goes around telling everybody he's my autism inspiration.
I won't lie, things might be harder for you and they will certainly be harder for them. But it can be wonderful in strange and unexpected ways. There are parts of my family life that are lighter and different and better because I am the way I am. And with your help, your child can grow up to be okay. The future they have might not be the one you'd envisage for them, but it can still be wonderful. I want to help make my tiny, teeny, infinitesimal patch of the world a little bit brighter.
I have kind of like a dream type job, TV presenter, but overall I just feel that if there's an opportunity and I haven't given it a go, or it's something which I feel like, oh yeah, I might have some interest in that, or if it's, you know, if it's definitely something that I'm passionate about, like autism for example, then I go for it, because what's the worst that could happen? If the more opportunities you have, the more avenues, the more people you meet, and just the more of a community you can build in your own life, and I just feel it brings a new sense of life by having these opportunities.
My ambitions in life are very simple. I think they're to be healthy and they're to be happy, and for work to play a great part in that. So I want to be in a working environment where I can feel supported, where I feel motivated, and where I actually want to go, where I actually want to be there, to go in, to move things forwards, to achieve. And ultimately by feeling that, by being in that way, in my line of work anyway, I'm then best placed to be able to create resources, to create materials that will enable more people to access information and knowledge, to be trained, and ultimately to be able to share good practice around supporting people with autism.
So my ambition in life is just a small one. I want to change the world. I'm on a real mission to do what I can to raise awareness for neurodiversity, so that I can live in a world where the neurodivergent are valued, and see a positive future for my son so that he can grow up feeling valued and feeling like he has a place in this world.
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to these stories of people on the spectrum at work. I hope you can see now that with just a few small adjustments, we can create a much stronger workforce. If you would like to get involved with the Neurodiversity Champions, email me on allmeansall@groupm.com. Thank you.